One of the most important parts of the cat and mouse game that malware developers play with defenders, network defenders, threat intelligence folks, is creating malware that is very difficult to detect. Today, we're going to talk about one of the ways that malware developers use to make malware that's more difficult to detect. It doesn't make it impossible. There are still ways that you can detect malware that uses crypters, which is what we're going to be talking about today. But it does add an extra layer of complexity. And I actually found a really good open source crypter that we're going to be going through today. It is created by this person named Daniel Ballard, AMAOP on GitHub. I'm going to leave a link down in the description. And I actually contributed a little bit, very, very tiny piece of code to this project, and I plan on doing a little bit more with the project as well. But they've got a really great GitHub that has some resources of how to use the crypter. This is a fairly typical type of crypter that you might see like actually out in the quote unquote wild. So it's actually a fairly good example of one that we can kind of go through. Now it's unfinished. He's got a couple of things in the to-do list to go through, but it actually is unfinished in a way that is kind of beneficial. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But yeah, let's just dive into the code. I'm going to do a full kind of code walkthrough and kind of a process walkthrough from a high level. But let's start with what crypters are. So crypters, you've got your piece of malware, right? So you've got malware, and that malware is made up of bytes. This is not anything revolutionary, nothing super surprising. Your malware is, created from a series of bytes. So zeros and ones and zeros and ones, and repeated until the end of your malware. What defenders are going to do is they are going to build what are called signatures based on these bytes. So they're going to find places within the malware that is indicative of what the malware is or what the malware does. You've got different AV, EDR things that can do this in different ways. But in general, the way most signatures work is they will find a byte string. So let's just say this string right here. And they are going to yoink that out and say this string means this is malware. Oop, that's ugly. So they're going to write a signature, and they're going to say this indicates that we are talking about this malware. Okay, so this is kind of like the basics of network defense, or kind of like cybersecurity, at least against malware. You're finding these signatures within files that indicate that this is a piece of malware, a specific piece of malware, or at least something that's malicious. So I might look into the code and I find a place where it loads DLLs in a very specific way. And I say, okay, anything that loads DLLs in this specific way is malware. Well, another part of the cat and mouse game is, okay, well, there are also perfectly benign programs that use that specific byte string or use that specific way of loading DLLs. So you can't just say that everything that does it this way is malware. Otherwise, you're going to be blocking a bunch of perfectly legitimate software. This is something that I've had to deal with constantly in the cybersecurity space with my day job and with other research that I've done. So this signature building is actually very difficult. You're trying to find specific areas within malware that indicates maliciousness, but it only indicates maliciousness. It doesn't indicate anything else. It's incredibly difficult. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds in this video because we're talking about crypters. So the reason why crypters make it more difficult for people who create malware is that it takes the malware, and instead of it just being that malware, we're going to run it through another layer, and we are going to create a second piece of code, okay? Or not a second piece of code, but kind of like a second executable. This is going to be, let's just call it crypted, because crypters can work in several different ways. You can literally just base64 encode a piece of malware and create a stub or some kind of program that deobfuscates it or takes it from a base64 piece of code to its raw binary form. And that will actually trick a lot of AVs because a lot of AVs are very, very stupid. So I'm going to call it crypted because it technically sometimes can just be encoded. And that's going to take these bytes and transform them into something different. We're going to call this piece of code red. So this piece of code is changed in different ways. It can be encrypted, it can be obfuscated, it can be just different. Okay, so we're changing the entirety of this code. I'm not going to spend all of that time writing out zeros and ones. You kind of get the picture. And it creates an encrypted version. The reason why this is more difficult to detect is that now all of a sudden this piece of code might mean we're going to load this specific DLL, or we're going to make a call out to this, C2. So that may be what's represented by this piece of code. In this encrypted piece of code, that's not present anymore. You don't see the same strings. You don't see the same, raw binary format. You're going to have the encrypted version. Now here's the difficult part, and creating crypters at least. This right here is not runnable by the machine because it's encrypted. This is no longer raw binary format. So what will end up happening is you will have the real code here, and you will have a stub. So this is going to be the stub. So this right here is the encrypted binary. Let's just call it the obfuscated binary. Okay. So what the stub's job is to take, what the stub's job is its job is to take all of this right here and turn it back into the original malware form while it's running. So the stub is actually executable code that will then decrypt or deobfuscate the code that is bundled with it. That is the encrypted code here, or the obfuscated code, and turn it back into the original malware code. But it usually does it in memory. So it's not just going to decrypt it, drop it to disk, though it can do that. That's actually going to be the example that we see here in a second. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to create a signature because this stub isn't inherently malicious. It's just doing normal deobfuscation stuff. So you can't necessarily call deobfuscation malicious in the same easy way that you can calling out to a C2 malicious. So it's much more difficult to create a signature based on the stub, and it's very, very difficult to create a signature based on the obfuscated binary. But there are still ways that network defenders can do it. We're not going to talk about that as much as we are going to talk about crypters. So this crypter right here, fairly simple at a high level. What this crypter is essentially doing is it is creating an obfuscated binary using AES encryption, and then it appends the key at the very end along with some padding. And then it creates a stub that is going to take that encrypted binary that is bundled with the stub. It is going to decrypt it, and then it's going to drop it into memory. And it's also got a couple of pretty cool add-ons that we'll talk about here in a second. It's got the ability to run it quote-unquote fileless. So it's basically going to load that binary into memory and run it, basically like that instead of, dropping it to disk. And it's got some anti-VM stuff as well. So let's walk through the code. So this is a Rust project because that's all I do anymore is just malware Rust stuff. We've got two different parts. We've got the encryption part and we've got the stub part. I'm not going to show an actual walkthrough of the code because I'm actually in the middle of kind of pseudo rewriting this. Not fully rewriting it, but basically rewriting it in such a way that's a little bit easier to use. So I'm not going to show a full demo of this, but you can also access it on GitHub pretty easily. So this crypt part is the first part that we're going to talk about. Let's look over here at the source and look at main. So here's the part that I actually contributed. It's very, very minimal. Basically, all it's doing is instead of requiring a specific file name to encrypt, you are able to pass that as an input argument, which, again, it was a matter of like a couple lines of code, like 5 lines of code. But essentially what it does is it takes an input file name, and it is going to encrypt that using AES encryption, and it will output a key. So here is the encrypted, this is going to be the file that ends up holding the encrypted bytes, and it's going to create this key. Now, AES encryption depends on a set block size, usually of size 16, I believe. So AES 128 requires a block size of 16. In order to ensure that you've got block alignment there, you add padding to the blocks, or at least to one of the blocks. So that padding size will basically be the difference between the block size and the required block size. So if you got a block of size 12, you basically add 6 bytes of padding to that, and you will have a block of 16. That padding is usually just null bytes. That's where you set the null bytes there. You create a random string using the standard range from entropy function here. You're going to fill those bytes. So basically that's what's actually creating that padding there. And you are generating your key from a slice, so fairly simple stuff there. So that's actually creating the key. That's not doing the padding. The padding is done down here, I believe. So for every single block within your padded plain text byte. So that padded plain text byte is being created right here. So we're extending that array by that padding size. That's where that's actually happening. If I were paying attention to the code, I would have known that already. So we're going through each individual block and we are encrypting it. So that's using that key, right? Let's see. So that's that cipher, which is being created with the key right here. And then you're encrypting it and writing it out to disk. So that's that encrypted file.write all, and you're writing out those encrypted bytes. And that is writing out the key as well. So what you'll end up getting is you'll have an encrypted block of bytes, and you will have the key that is outputted. So that is part one. You are encrypting the file. Now the second part, basically if you drop that encrypted file and the key down to a victim, you wouldn't really be able to do much with it without like directly AES decrypting it with that key. So that's what the stub is doing. So that second part of code back here, which he has basically broken it out into two different Rust code bases. What I'm planning on doing is just kind of combining those, and that's going to be my next contribution in this open source project. So if we look over here at the stub, this is what is actually doing the stuff. So you've got an inside VM function here, but you are creating the infected directory. So this is what is actually running on the victim, by the way. This stub is actually going to be running on the victim. So when you see this is in a VM, create the infected directory, establish persistence, things like that. It actually uses the same persistence mechanism that I use within my malware that I'm writing. So it's establishing persistence, and then it is decrypting the file into PE bytes, and it is running it in a fileless manner. So we'll walk through that here in a bit. So this decrypt file here, actually let's start, there's a better place to start. Let's look down here. So you're creating the infected directory here. That's where you're actually just creating the file or the folders where you're going to, do all of this stuff at. You are grabbing the name of the current executable. Let's see. Let's skip down a little bit. You're basically here. He's got a pretty interesting way that I'm going to steal a little bit to create a hidden file or a hidden directory, which is kind of neat. And let's see, establishing persistence. So like I was saying, this is basically the way that he is establishing persistence, which is similar to the way that I'm doing it within my malware. He's using I believe he's using a different library. He's using WinReg. So he's using WinReg. I'm doing the full Windows API calls. WinReg is probably a better way to do it, but I'm not doing it that way. So he's establishing persistence by setting up that registry key within run, which is the way most malware does it, I would think. And this fileless here is what is actually interesting. Fileless uses memexec, which is a way of executing memory directly in memory instead of executing a file. You have to use unsafe for that because you're accessing memory, and Rust doesn't really like that very much. So let's see, p bytes equals decrypt file. That's going to be where we're doing all of the fun stuff. So we're grabbing our encrypted bytes right here. Now this is the interesting part, and this is the part that I don't really understand that well, which kind of sucks since I'm doing a full walkthrough of it. This is going to be something that I do a little bit of research on throughout the rest of the week. Rust has a macro that's called include bytes, and basically what include bytes does is it runs at compile time, and it allows you to include bytes from another file within the malware itself and within the program itself, sorry, and you can refer to those bytes within the program. So what's really interesting here is that this include bytes macro runs at compile time to append the bytes to the end, or I would think it would be to the end of your executable. And then within the executable at runtime, you can refer to those bytes. So this is perfect for a crypter, because essentially what a stub crypter setup is you've got the stub and you've got the included encrypted bytes, and that's kind of how you do everything. So you're making reference to those encrypted bytes here. You are grabbing the key bytes in the key file, which uses the same included bytes here. So I believe technically that does append it to the end. So I was actually wrong there. So you're actually referring to the included bytes within key.txt, which are included within the malware itself. And that's done at compile time, like I said. and you are reading those keys into your key file reference here. And then you're doing the full decryption. Now, what this does, which is interesting, and I actually like this approach a lot, is all of this happens in memory. So you don't ever actually have the encrypted bytes being written out to disk, which makes it a little bit more difficult to defend against it, because if you've got an endpoint EDR, so something like a traditional AV that scans files that are being written out to your system, they're going to be able to catch things fairly easily that are being dropped to disk. So if I dropped a piece of malware straight to disk, that AV is probably going to catch it fairly easily. With this, the encrypted bytes are kept in memory. They're never actually written out to disk, and then they are actually run from memory as well, which is what that fileless function does there at the end. So here we're doing our decryption block by block, and we are writing it out to the decrypted bytes object here. So that is, right here. So that's that vector right there. You're writing it out to that vector. So here we're doing the actual removal of the padding itself, and you are returning the decrypted bytes. So when we go up here to, let's see, decrypt file, you're getting those PE bytes, and then you are passing that to the fileless function. So if we look at function fileless one more time, all you're doing there is executing that memory directly. Instead of writing it out to file, you are executing that memory directly. So this is a really, really good project to look at if you're trying to kind of learn how crypters work from a really high level. I actually learned a ton from this, including that include macro that I'm going to use within my own crypter that I'm writing. That might be kind of a spoiler, but probably within the next couple of days, I'm going to put out a video on my own crypter. I'm going to call it Scrambler, and I'm going to open source it as well. And that's also the subject of the research week that I'm doing within my Discord server. If you become a member in my Discord server, you get access to all of the research weeks that we're doing. This week we're doing Crypters. Next week we're going to hold a vote on it, but it's more than likely going to be peer-to-peer networking within malware, which is always an interesting subject. But yeah, if you're interested, you can join the Discord for free. Just be a normal person in the Discord. If you want to become a member, $8 a month through sub, I'll leave a link to that as well. That's about it. Take it easy. Peace.